morning, and thank you for joining me on the Path to Liberty. I'm Michael Bolden with the 10th Amendment Center, and this is the show for Monday, October 17th, 2022. And if you're like me, you've been hearing plenty over the last few days, if not longer, about a proposed national or federal assault weapons ban. And on this episode, rather than pointing out that all federal gun control is unconstitutional, the ATF shouldn't exist, it should be a corner store, I want to focus on the notion from both sides of the debate that weapons of war should not be in the hands of the people. But first of all, before getting to that, a quick hello and a huge thank you. Thank you so much for being here, whether this is your first episode or you've been here for every single one since day one. I can't thank you enough. And while we allow people another minute or so to get notifications to join us on the live stream, I want to, the mainstream platforms aren't as awesome as we'd like them to be. And of course, they don't always want us to be around anyways, but let's allow people to get time to get those notifications. I want to say hi to everyone out in the live chat. There's Senator DT and Kirk Morrison. Keith the Hat Guy, good to see you, Keith. Cheriton Farm, here's what Keith says. I think this is basically my episode right here. Keith's got it down. The purpose of the 2A is to recognize that citizens have the right to own assault weapons, the tool of the soldier, to block government tyranny and avoid the need for standing armies. Got a lot of it right there. Cheriton Farmer in Missouri. Kirk Morrison again, Garrett Ashley in Atlanta, Dixie Strong in Bama, Clay Kent over on Facebook, Liberty Spike in South Carolina, White Bearded New, I like that, Tyler B, Haji in Michigan, Gun Eye in Missouri, political stuff, and everyone else. Haji asks how the new digs. I don't know. You guys tell me. Does it look and sound good? Hopefully it does. I've been doing a lot of work to get moved in to a nice, quiet, clean, safe suburban place after a couple decades in the middle of the city, and it has been awesome so far. But anyways, maybe I'll do an article or a blog about my big transition to the burbs sometime soon. Also want to say hi to Glenn in Connecticut and happy Snowfish as well. Anyways, thank you all for being here. Let's get right to this. And I want to start out with some foundational principles, some essential points from the founders and old revolutionaries. And I think a good place to start is Noah Webster. We celebrated his birthday yesterday in history, which was October 16th, I think 1754. I don't know, it could have been 45, something like that. We published a really great article by Mike Meharry about that. You can find that over on the homepage at 10thamendmentcenter.com. But anyways, Noah Webster, this is his examination of the leading principles of the federal constitution in 1787. He pointed out that before a standing army can rule, the people must be disarmed. And one of the greatest fears of the founding generation was a large, permanent standing army. They recognized, and they lived through it, that tyrants will use military-style force or military force to oppress the people. They saw it and lived it firsthand, of course, with the massacre in Boston and quite a bit else, and the gun-grabbing schemes that they did. And so Noah Webster understood this through the Revolutionary era, that what the British did and what they all do all throughout history is they try to take the guns. And that's what led to Lexington and Concord. That was a gun control program. They were blocking and trying to take gunpowder. And, well, it led to a lot of problems. That's how they try to rule. That's what tyrants always do. And here's Webster again. He said, the supreme power in America cannot enforce unjust laws by the sword. But why? At least it was at that time. Because the whole body of the people are armed, the whole body of the people, and constitute a force superior to any band of regular troops that can be, on any pretense, raised in the United States. So the idea that the whole body of the people were armed, not just with slingshots, but with weapons that were equivalent to or greater than any regular force, was an important principle for the founding generation. Now, these days, they don't really use the professional military, but they've got a different version of it. They've basically armed up a bunch of unconstitutional federal agencies to act like a military force. And I did an episode on that I thought I'd point out that I thought was a good one to reference. Militarized federal agencies, the other standing army. Now, what's most important for us to understand at this point is that for the Second Amendment, the reasons that the founders gave us the Second Amendment, it's not just about individual personal self-defense. That is an important part, or hunting, or whatever you want to do there, without hurting other people, of course, without committing a crime. It's not just about that. There are actually four main reasons that we were given by the founding generation for why we have the natural right to keep and bear arms, the natural right to self-defense, and the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. I'm just going to briefly mention a few of them right here. First of all, to balance and protect against the need for the bane of liberty, that is, large, permanent standing armies, just like Keith the Hat Guy said in the live chat right there at the outset. Here's how James Madison put it. As the greatest danger to liberty is from large standing armies. Now, this is the father of the Constitution. The greatest danger to liberty is from large standing armies. It is best to prevent them by an effectual provision for a good militia. A good militia is one that is well armed and well trained in military tactics. So it's up to the people of the several states to arm up and to really know how to use what they've armed up with. And I failed on all those points, really, but hopefully someday I'm going to keep trying to improve here. Here's another one. Number two is to promote the individual natural right of self-defense, the individual natural right to keep and bear arms. Here's the great Mercy Otis Warren, the muse or the conscience of the American Revolution. She said, self-defense is a primary law of nature, which no subsequent law of society can abolish. Now, mind you, there are plenty of laws on the books today. And if we're talking about federal gun control and a federal assault weapons ban, I don't have enough time to cover all the states and all the problems there. And the connection a lot of times between state gun control and federal funding and federal joint task forces and the federal war on drugs, that's for other episodes. But there are plenty of federal laws on the books. If you think about it, the National Firearms Act of 1934, the Gun Control Act of 1968, its amendments in 1986, the Undetectable Firearms Act of 1988, whatever that one they passed this summer, and then the 2018 bump stock ban, all kinds of stuff that shouldn't exist. Now, the only reason that they really do exist, the only reason that they do go into effect is that people keep complying with them. So unfortunately, we don't have enough people who believe in exercising their rights, whether the government wants them to or not, but I'm getting off track. Now, number three and number four, also Keith the Hat Guy, man, awesome job in that first early comment, pointed out these. Two, it enables the people to repel foreign invasions, heavily armed population, and it acts as a defense against domestic tyrants. Now, people like James Madison pointed out that the defense against domestic tyrants is not just having a battle, but having so much firepower that they don't even think about it, that it doesn't need to happen. It is a check by having, it's the old idea, the old adage of a good defense is a strong offense, or a strong offense is a good defense. But here's how Tench Coxe put it, one of the most prolific, if not the most prolific writers on the right to keep and bear arms at the time of the founding. He was famous at the time. No one knows him today. Maybe this is why. But he's talking about the natural individual right to self-defense, but he points out that it's not just limited to hunting weapons, and this is why. Because you have to be able to have the firepower to deal with foreign and domestic tyrants. And he said their swords and every other terrible implement of the soldier are the birthright of an American. So all the terrible implements of a soldier are the birthright of an American. And I covered all of these in much more detail in another episode back in August, 4 main reasons for the Second Amendment. I will link to that in the show notes over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. And I should mention, if I didn't right at the outset, because I'm thinking about, okay, is the sound working? Is the stream connected, etc.? But over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty, that's our show homepage. You're going to find all the archives of the show for over close to 4.5 years now. And on each individual episode, I publish a blog post about 1 to 2 hours after the live stream is done, and there you're going to find all the stuff that I'm mentioning, all the reference links. So when I'm talking about these source documents from Noah Webster, Tench Coxe, and others, you're going to find those linked there so you can read and learn more in context on your own time. And that brings me to the current events of the day. And I feel like this just happens every couple of months. We got to keep pointing out that people really want to push for a so-called assault weapons ban. And the title of this episode is, don't to blow, what did I put it as? Don't concede the foundation. And in essence, just by calling them assault weapons, I am, in essence, kind of conceding that foundation. So I apologize for that, but I thought it would help a little bit with the algorithm to get a more popular term there. But here's from Uncle Joe just a few days ago, and this is a tweet from Firearms Policy Coalition at Gun Policy. You really should follow FPC wherever you, whatever platforms you're on. But they put it this way: we must pass an, no, they didn't put it this way. This is a quote from the president. We must pass an assault weapons ban. The American people support this common sense action to get, and here's the key phrase that I want to focus on, weapons of war off our streets. Again, we must pass an assault weapon ban. That's a misnomer. And then even if what they're defining, these semi-automatics, AR-15, the civilian version of an AR, these aren't really necessarily weapons of war, but they want to call it that because the idea is that weapons of war are only supposed to be in the hands of government. But if you saw what, or you're just listening to what I had to say here from the founding generation, we know that that's absolute, well, it's a crock, we'll put it that way. Here's from Everytown and... who are they? Moms Demand Action. Shannon Watts, founder of Moms Demand Action, said these weapons of war have no place in our communities. Weapons of war. And here from Brady United, they describe an assault weapon like this. It refers to a semi-automatic gun designed for military use and quick, efficient killing. Assault weapons are uniquely lethal because of their rapid rate of fire and high muzzle velocity. Basically, they're talking about, in general, the debate is, well, this is an assault weapon. It's designed for military use, so it can't be in the hands of the people. And the opposition, which I'm going to get to in just a moment, are saying, oh, no, you've got this wrong. That isn't. That so-called assault weapon is commonly used. It's for individuals. It's not for the military. The military stuff is banned, so we don't have to add this to that list. And they're basically, and I'm going to get to this in just a moment, but they're conceding the point. Here again from Brady United, military-style assault weapons and high-capacity magazines exist only to enact maximum destruction, or, of course, the threat of it. So that's actually true. And there's simply no reason that everyday Americans need access to them. And we know that's absolutely false, because if we understand what the founders told us, this is exactly the purpose. The more high-powered weaponry is to enable the citizens to be able to do what they need to do to defend themselves and their country against, well, dangers, foreign and domestic. It's for protection of self, property against standing armies, the need for them, foreign invasion, domestic tyrants. And it isn't just, unfortunately, the Brady or the Everytown people who are getting this whole discussion wrong. It's people like the NRA who are supposed to be on our side, but those of you who follow me and listen to the show regularly, you know I am no fan of these people who are probably the most effective gun control organization in history. They've gotten a lot passed, but that's another note. Anyways, here's how they put it. AR-15s and other semi-automatic rifles are not the fully automatic military-grade firearms they are often claimed to be by gun control supporters and the media. So what they're doing is they're basically having that argument that I'm trying to explain here, and hopefully I'm doing a decent job of this. Instead of saying, okay, well, you're wrong about calling these military grade, but on the other hand, the people are supposed to be armed in military grade hardware and military grade equipment. That's how it's supposed to be. But let's talk about semantics. So they're only arguing the point, and I think they're getting drawn in, or maybe they're just bad guys on this in the first place. And here from a lawsuit against the New York regulation, courthousenews.com, I'm not sure when this was published, but here's a quote from the complaint. The banned semi-automatic firearms, like all other semi-automatic firearms, fire only one round for each pull of the trigger. They are not machine guns. And the reason that they say that is because, of course, the NFA of 1934 bans people from having machine guns. Well, unless you're really rich and can go through the process. So the argument shouldn't be about like, okay, well, this fires rapidly or one shot per trigger. It doesn't matter. None of that. The federal government has no authority under the Constitution to ban any of it. And they're, again, conceding the point. They are not machine guns. What is more, they say, the designation assault weapons is a complete misnomer. I agree with that. Developed by anti-gun publicists, in their crusade against lawful firearm ownership. Well, it is a misnomer, but the idea of an assault, running an assault up on a hill or something like that, is to give people the vision of weapons of war. And if you concede the point that weapons of war aren't something that the people are supposed to have in the first place, you're always going to be in this battle. They're eventually going to, well, here, let me keep going. A military machine gun, they say, can fire 1,000 rounds per minute, the suit notes, whereas an AR-15 can only fire as often as a person can pull its trigger. So there, again, it's conceding the point, and all you do is you need enough people, and this is what we have today, enough people that as long as they believe that a particular tool or particular tool of self-defense is, quote, a military-grade weapon, and then the Fed supposedly can ban it anywhere, even though everywhere, because, well, that's what the people are supporting. And I think in the long run, this is going to lead to some big problems. And I've often complained about the left taking a really weak sauce opposition to facial recognition surveillance. Rather than saying that warrantless mass surveillance is wrong all the time, they focus on the problem of facial recognition. Part of it is correct that it actually does a really bad job on people of color and that misidentifies people far more often, like 60, 70% of the time. I forget the numbers that I covered on episodes, but if you're only focusing on that, eventually, over time, they're going to fix that, and then you have no leg to stand on because they're like, well, now it gets everyone equally. And this is the same type of a problem, I think. If you lower your standard and you're only arguing against what the opposition wants you to argue against instead of actually taking a stand and talking about your principles properly, you're going to actually create an environment where they can actually do more violations of our liberty, if that's even possible, but I'm sure it is, in the future. And I think over time, well, what is it going to lead to? Are people going to start saying, oh, a Beretta M9 is now a weapon of war because it's a U.S. Army issued sidearm? I don't know. But I think soon as you say that as long as the military has it, the people shouldn't, I think people with power are eventually going to actually want to ban all of it. Here's Suzanne Sherman in an article. This is an updated version of this article that we published in June, From Muskets to AR-15, Weapons of War are Enemies of Tyranny. I'm going to link to this in the show notes, of course, 10thamendmentcenter.com/path-to-liberty. Here's how Suzanne, along with Carl Jones, put it. Many politicians claim to support the Second Amendment while simultaneously insisting the federal government has the authority to ban military-style weapons. And it's not just politicians, but it's a lot of these big organizations that are supposedly protecting your right to keep and bear arms. Like the NRA, they're just saying, oh, well, you can't ban this because it isn't a military weapon. That is conceding that you can ban military-style weapons. And here they are again. They say in the process, they concede a crucial point that was a central reason for the ratification of the Second Amendment. The people must have the means by which they can resist a tyrannical government. Again, whether it's a tyrannical group coming over to invade, or if it's from your own home, foreign or domestic. The people must have the means by which they can resist a tyrannical government, means rendered ineffective if we surrender the right to be on a level playing field when it comes to firearms. So the idea is not just, oh, yeah, you've defined assault weapons wrong. Of course, that is absolutely correct, but not that, well, you can't ban these because they really aren't weapons of war. You've been drawn into a semantic argument that the gun grabbers actually want you to be in because they're going to convince enough people who hate liberty that all kinds of stuff are weapons of war. Hear from Rob Natelson, the founders in the Second Amendment. This is from a speech maybe about a decade ago. Really good stuff. I refer to it all the time. Again, I will be linking to it in the show notes. Rob says, so according to the Second Amendment, we want all men of military age, I would say all people, but that's just, we're not going to worry about gender terms today. We want all men of military age, well-trained in the use of weapons. And why is this? Because as the preamble to the Second Amendment tells us, it is necessary for the security of a free state. And by a free state, he writes, the Constitution means a free country. And so he continues, so all men of military age should be well trained in weapons so that America survives as a free country. And if we're just talking about muskets and flint rocks, there's no way that that works. Anyone can invade, and this is just reducing the Second Amendment and the purpose of it just for, I don't know, hunting, sport shooting. And I think that's really what they want to do in the long run. Well, what weapons, Rob asks? Obviously, the muskets and single-shot rifles in use when the Second Amendment was adopted are no longer sufficient to do the job. Today, the Second Amendment protects a range of weapons appropriate for citizen militias, resisting foreign invaders, and tyrannical politicians. People don't like talking about that, but that's the point. Now, that doesn't mean go shoot them up. No one's telling you to do that. But as long as the people are really disarmed, and if we're talking about, I know a lot of people tell me when we talk about disarming the people, I know just when we posted an image, that meme of Noah Webster talking about standing armies ruling only after the people are disarmed. A lot of people who believe in the right to keep and bear arms will tell us, oh no, that's never going to happen. But it already has. If the military-grade weapons have been banned in civilian hands for decades, almost 100 years at this point, it certainly has already happened. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to keep going, and we see how every small step leads to another one and another one and another one. And another 100 years, I think people in the future are going to be like, well, how did they get rid of that Beretta? Who knows? Anyways, the intent of the Constitution, and this is back to Suzanne and Carl, the intent of the Constitution and historical background are irrefutable. A civilian, decentralized force was viewed as the optimal means by which forces loyal to a king or central government could be held in check should they become tyrannical in nature. It's the first line of defense. The founding generation did not believe that the citizen militia was going to be the most effective through a long conflict, but it's the first and very quick line of defense because you did not want to have a permanent standing army, a large one at least for most of them. The government, the media, and the education system, Suzanne and Carl write, have successfully indoctrinated the people into believing that their safety lies in their ability to defend themselves, but only extends so far as to render us subservient to the capabilities of the government to defend itself from us. Think about that. The government always wants to make sure that it is a force more powerful than all of us, and the government, through the Constitution, is a creation of the people of the several states. So the creation right now has far more power than the creator. But the people, the creators, actually have that power if they choose to use it. Anyways, in other words, this is the polar opposite of the purpose of the Second Amendment. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to get from where we are today to the state of liberty, to a land of the free in one day, in 1 year, in one fell swoop, or honestly, anytime soon. I believe there are too many people who actually hate liberty. We are surrounded by people who either hate or fear liberty. They only want the government to be as armed up as possible. The largest government, largest empire in history. This is the dumbest thing ever. But conceding that a natural right, or just getting a watered down version of it, it's not a winning strategy for liberty in the long run. I would rather go with Thomas Jefferson's approach. And even if we can't get people to believe that it should be our right to have military-grade weapons in our hands, in the hands of the people in large numbers, not just weird collectors who have a lot of money that want to show it off in a glass case, but to train with it regularly, to use them regularly, to understand. I think Thomas Jefferson's approach in his letter to James Madison is really the way to go. November 17, 1798, this is the day after the Kentucky resolutions against the Hated Alien and Sedition Acts were assigned by the governor of Kentucky. He said, "I enclose you a copy of the draft of the Kentucky Resolves. I think we should distinctly affirm all the important principles they contain so as to hold to that ground in the future, and leave the matter in such a train as that we may not be committed absolutely to push the matter to extremities, and yet may be free to push as far as events will render prudent." So what is Jefferson telling us? The short version, the TLDR, is we have to always assert our ultimate principles, even if we know we can't reach them today. We want to actually have that goal, that top-line goal out there. And when it comes to military-grade weapons, so-called assault weapons, whatever you want to call them, if you take the position that the only reason you oppose an assault weapons ban is because they're not military weapons, they're not weapons of war, you've actually conceded the point. You're never actually holding all the important principles of the Second Amendment, of the natural right of self-defense, the right to keep and bear arms. You're not actually doing what Thomas Jefferson had to say. And then you can't, even if you do take his next strategy of pushing as far as events will render prudent, your top of the line is far lower. It's watered down to where it shouldn't be. And here's how he put it years earlier in a letter to his friend, the Reverend Charles Clay. He pointed out that the ground of liberty is to be gained by inches, that we must be contented to secure what we can get from time to time and eternally press forward for what is yet to get. It takes time to persuade men to do even what is for their own good. And it's going to take time to persuade the people to do what is for their own good when it comes to their natural right of self-defense, to protecting the Second Amendment, whether the government wants us to or not. And I think it is so important to get this message out there, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how long it takes to get into the heads of the people, whether it's in our lifetime or we're just setting a foundation for the future. We are working hard every single day to get this kind of stuff out to people, and nothing, absolutely nothing helps us get that job done more than the financial faith and support of our members. You can join us for as little as $2 a month over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. Again, 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. And I should take a moment here, since I've got it here in my notes, I want to take a quick moment and say a huge thank you to just a handful of people who have joined us recently. I really appreciate your financial support. There's Christine in Colorado, Robert in Maryland, Steve also in Colorado representing, Matthew in Pennsylvania, and Mary in Georgia. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. And whether you're able to pitch in financially or not, you can also help us out by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, smashing the like button, leaving comments. All that stuff will trigger algorithms and help us reach and teach more people. Let me take a look over in the live chat and see if there's any comments or questions I can get to. Here's Happy Snowfish. This is a good one. Maybe I'll disagree just a little bit, but I think the point is essential. It's really not up to SCOTUS, Supreme Court. Oh, I scrolled past it. It's really not up to SCOTUS to strike down gun control laws. It's up to the people to flat out ignore them. And I think if there's a case in front of the Supreme Court that talks about a gun control law that's unconstitutional, mostly redundant there, they should absolutely issue an opinion that this is unconstitutional. But it certainly is not up to the people to wait for the government to tell us that the government is not following the rules of the Constitution that are from the people. Again, it's not up to us to wait for the government to tell us that the government did something wrong. It is up to the people to keep the government in check, whether the government wants us to or not. That is the only way you can preserve liberty. That is the only way you can protect the Constitution. As John Dickinson told us, that the supreme sovereignty of the people is the ultimate check. It is up to the people. It is their duty to watch, their right to take care that the Constitution be preserved, or as he put it in the Roman phrase, to ensure that the republic receive no damage. Or I'm wearing the shirt here for those of you watching the video. Mercy Otis Warren said, resist the first approaches of tyranny. Not vote the bums out against the first approaches of tyranny, but resist them. It is essential for the people to keep things in check. Let me see if Kirk Morrison says, I want an M82 Browning. Well, I think the more that the people are armed in the right way, the better. I don't know what a Browning is, to be honest with you, but I'm trying to learn a lot about this. It's fascinating. A lot of people are really surprised. They expect that someone who is so hardcore on the right to keep and bear arms, there should be none of these gun control laws at all. All of them are unconstitutional. They're surprised that I really suck when it comes to my skills. I've only had a handful of shooting lessons. I've tried to actually improve myself now that I'm living out in the burbs in Orange County. It's fascinating. As I've been around the neighborhood, I've seen like an ammo shop, a gunsmith. I'm going to just stop in and start introducing myself to people. So if you live in the area, you've got a recommendation for me, I would love to see that. Happy Snowfish also points out that John Marshall also held in 1803 that a law repugnant to the Constitution is void. This is a long-standing view from the founders and old revolutionaries. We can go all the way back to 1761, James Otis Jr.'s arguments against the writs of assistance, where he said an act against the Constitution is void. Of course, he was talking about the unwritten British Constitution, but when government is given rules, it's not up to the government to tell us what the government is doing, whether it's doing something right or wrong. It is up to the people. There is a supreme sovereignty of the people that's final authority. Let's see what else we've got here. If there's any other comments or questions I can get back to. Bend thy knee, lick thy boot, Bonehead 88. Well, that's pretty much what most people are doing when they're saying, Oh, okay, well, when you're debating with people about whether or not an assault weapon is a weapon of war and qualifies to be banned by the central government, you're basically bending your knees. This is a population looking for permission rather than acting free. As Thomas Jefferson put it, a free people claim their rights as derived from the laws of nature and not as a gift of their chief magistrate. Anyways, well, I hope you guys learned something here. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you had a great weekend. Hopefully everything worked in what I had here. I did basically my full episode. I did a couple of last week from here, the Fast Friday, just shorter episodes. But hopefully this all worked. I got everything set up, and I really appreciate you spending some of your time with me today. Again, I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you learned something. I hope your week is off to a great start. Don't forget that membership program, 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. Reviews on Apple Podcasts, etc. Please continue leaving comments, or you can email me, team@10thamendmentcenter.com. I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you next time on the path to liberty.